You know, when you hold a modern microchip in your hand, there's this really strange disconnect between what you're actually seeing and what you're holding.
Oh, yeah, completely. It's just a tiny little square.
Right. It's like the size of a fingernail. It
Yes.
weighs practically nothing. I mean, you could drop it and lose it in the carpet and ever find it again.
Exactly.
And yet that tiny little thing contains, you know, billions of microscopic transistors. It holds the capacity to run entire global financial systems. It processes these massive amounts of data and basically keeps our whole modern interconnected world from just,
Yeah.
well, collapsing.
It's the engine of the modern world. Yeah.
Yeah. And you look at it and you think, how can something so physically small be so structurally consequential?
It totally defies our natural intuition, doesn't it? I mean, we naturally expect monumental impact to come in monumental packaging.
Right. Big things should be big.
Exactly. But then, you step into the world of ancient manuscripts and suddenly you find the historical equivalent of that exact microchip.
Which is what we're doing today, diving into a really fascinating text.
We are. So a scholar named Chris R. Velasquez recently surveyed an ancient text that is so incredibly brief, it's honestly microscopic by historical standards.
Yeah, I was looking at the survey, and the text is, what is it, a mere 13 sentences.
That's it, just 13 sentences. It's one single, incredibly short chapter.
And yet, our mission today on this deep dive is to extract the massive, world-altering implications that are somehow hidden within those few lines.
And they are massive, because what makes this text, which is commonly known as the second letter of John, so compelling is that, well, it is not some abstract ivory tower theological essay.
Right, it's not just guys sitting around debating ideas.
Not at all. It wasn't written to be debated politely over tea. This is a high-stakes, first-century crisis management document. I mean, it is a letter forged in the absolute fires of a real-world, community-shattering conflict.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I'm trying to figure out how one of the shortest texts in the entire historical record can contain such a dense, heavy-hitting framework for truth, for love, and for drawing really hard boundaries.
It packs a punch, for sure.
It really does. And think about your own daily life as you're listening to this. We are all constantly navigating this modern world of just overwhelming information, right?
Oh, absolutely. The information fatigue is real.
Yeah, we are always trying to figure out who to trust, whose platform to support, and how to be a welcoming, open person without accidentally endorsing toxic or fundamentally destructive ideas.
It's a huge tension.
It feels like a profoundly modern dilemma. But then you read this 13-sentence letter, and it proves that this struggle is just deeply, deeply ancient.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture of the ancient Mediterranean world, we find that the early Christians were grappling with those exact same dynamics. But for them, it wasn't just social media drama. It came with literal life and death stakes. Yeah, and to understand how they navigated it, we actually have to examine the sort of cryptic envelope this message arrived in.
Let's look at the greeting then, because it reads completely like a covert espionage drop.
It really does.
The author never actually uses his name. He identifies himself simply as the elder.
Right. In the original Greek, the term there is ho presbyteros.
Ho presbyteros. And he is writing this letter to the elect lady and her children, or eklektokoria.
Exactly.
I have to imagine that if a Roman mail carrier intercepted this in the first century, they would be incredibly confused. Like, who are these people?
Oh, they wouldn't have a clue. What's fascinating here is the sheer amount of historical detective work those two titles alone have generated over the centuries.
I bet.
Let's start with the sender, ho presbyteros. The traditional interpretation, which has held massive weight throughout history, points to John the Apostle.
Okay, so one of the original 12.
Yes, one of the original followers of Jesus, now an old man, and he's writing with this immense pastoral humility. Instead of throwing his apostolic weight around and demanding obedience, he could have said, I am an apostle, the last living eyewitness, you have to listen to me.
Right, he could have pulled rank.
Exactly, he could have pulled rank. But he adopts a term of familial pastoral care instead. He is just the elder.
That makes sense from a leadership perspective. It's kind of like a 4-star general taking off the uniform and just talking to his troops as a seasoned veteran.
That's a great analogy.
But the historical record isn't completely unified on that, is it? I mean, from the survey, it seems there's a bit of a debate.
There is, yeah, it isn't completely unified. Alternative scholarly views suggest it could be a different historical figure entirely, someone known as John the Elder.
A different John.
Right, a
Sure.
figure mentioned by early church fathers like Papias. Other scholars even propose it might be a broader Johannian school.
Oh, like a group of people.
Yeah, a dedicated community of believers who are writing in the distinct theological voice of John, basically to preserve his teachings for the next generation.
Okay, so a few different theories there.
But here's the really crucial takeaway from the Velocis survey. Regardless of the exact historical identity of the person holding the pen, the authority of the sender is absolutely undisputed within the text itself.
They clearly know who is writing to them.
Exactly. He writes as someone deeply personally responsible for the spiritual survival of this audience.
Which brings us to that audience. The elect lady and her children. What do we make of that? Is this a literal woman, like a prominent patroness who just had a really large family living in a villa somewhere?
Well, while a tiny minority of scholars entertain the idea of a literal historical woman, the dominant reading, and honestly, the one that perfectly fits the socio-religious context of the era, is that the elect lady is entirely symbolic.
Okay.
It is a local congregation. It was likely located somewhere in Asia Minor, which would be modern-day Western Turkey.
Oh.
Perhaps in the orbit of the major city of Ephesus. So the lady is the church itself, and her children are the individual members of that congregation.
And that theory gets a massive boost at the very end of the document, right? Where the author sends greetings from your elect sister.
Yes, exactly.
He's clearly talking about his own local congregation sending greetings to theirs. So it's church-to-church correspondence, but it's just masked in this beautiful family imagery.
That's a huge point. And it raises an important question about how the early church actually viewed itself.
How so?
Well, this family imagery functions ecclesially. It forces the believers to view their church not as some cold, bureaucratic institution or, a civic club, but as an intimate, fiercely accountable household.
Right. I understand the theological beauty of calling yourselves a family, sure. But if this is an authoritative leader writing to a specific congregation, why all the cloak and dagger nicknames?
That's the real question.
Yeah, I mean, why not just write to the church in Ephesus from John?
Ah.
It feels a bit like finding an old yellowed postcard in an antique shop addressed to the big kahuna, and you have to reverse engineer an entire social circle just to figure out who is talking to whom.
It does feel highly secretive, and that is very likely by design.
Okay.
We have to remember we are looking at a period usually dated to the late 1st century, roughly AD 85 to 95.
Okay, so late in the game for the first generation.
Right. And this is likely during the reign of the Roman Emperor Domitian. The early Christian movement was not a dominant, socially acceptable, state-sanctioned religion.
Far from it.
They were an obscure, highly misunderstood, and increasingly persecuted minority. They were small, socially vulnerable assemblies living under the absolute iron-fisted rule of the Roman Empire.
So they didn't have massive cathedrals or public tax-exempt status. They were meeting secretly in dining rooms, right?
Exactly. They relied heavily on intricate, fragile networks of patronage, shared resources, and underground hospitality just to survive.
Wow.
And Ephesus was a massive, bustling regional center. It was a hub of commerce and pagan worship, particularly the cult of Artemis.
So they're completely surrounded.
Totally surrounded. By using the symbolic familial language, the elder, the elect lady, the children, the sister, they were accomplishing two vital things. First, they were providing a necessary layer of operational security.
Because if the Romans find it.
Right. If a Roman magistrate confiscated this papyrus, it just looks like an old man writing to a mother and her kids. Nothing to see here.
That's brilliant.
But more importantly, it was a psychological reinforcement. During a time of really intense external pressure and internal consolidation, they were constantly reminding themselves of their distinct, interconnected identity.
They were building an impenetrable culture through language.
Exactly.
And understanding that they viewed themselves as a single vulnerable family unit leads us perfectly into what the elder is actually writing to them about.
Right.
He's laying down the operational code for this family, and he starts with a radical redefinition of two concepts that completely dominate our modern discourse. I'm talking about truth and love.
Oh, yeah. Those two concepts form the absolute bedrock of this entire document.
So, the elder starts the letter by stating that he rejoices. And it's a deep moral joy, not just a fleeting happy feeling, because he has found some of these children walking in the truth.
Right.
And the Greek word used for walking is peripadesh, and truth is aletheia. But in the very next breath, he issues a command.
He pivots quickly.
He does. He clarifies it is not new, but a command they have had from the very beginning. Love one another. Agape.
This right here is the core tension of the letter, and truly it's the beating heart of Johannine theology.
Tell me more about that.
What the author is doing here is creating a profound, unbreakable fusion between these two ideas. In this ancient framework, truth and love are completely fundamentally inseparable. You just cannot have one without the other.
So what does this all mean for someone listening today? Because if you look at our modern operating system, we treat truth and love like a zero-sum game.
We really do.
Yeah, it's like oil and water. If you are strictly focused on truth-like, on hard facts, on rigid doctrine, on calling out reality culture, often perceives you as cold, harsh, and basically unloving.
You're seen as a bigot, sometimes.
Right. But on the flip side, if you focus entirely on love, which, let's be honest, we usually define today as detached benevolence, endless tolerance, or just the unconditional validation of whatever someone wants to do, you are inevitably forced to compromise or obscure the truth.
That's the modern bind, exactly.
But this text is proposing a reality where they are the exact same currency.
It is a radical departure from how we think. The text argues that they are mutually interpreting realities.
What does that mean, mutually interpreting?
Well, in this letter, love is not just a warm, fuzzy feeling in your chest. Love is explicitly mechanically defined as obedience to God's commandments. The Greek word is entoli.
Okay.
It is an action, a forward motion. And truth, athea, isn't just a sterile list of philosophical bullet points or, a doctrinal quiz you have to pass to get into the club.
Right, it's not just a trivia test.
Exactly. Truth is the very environment of the Christian life. It is the atmosphere they are commanded to walk in, to peripatesh.
I really love that word, peripate. It implies a journey, a lifestyle. It's like, think about the steel rebar and the concrete in a building foundation.
Okay.
The truth is the rigid steel, right? It gives it structure. And the love is the concrete that binds it all together and gives it shape.
I like that.
Because if you only have the steel, it's just an exposed, jagged cage. It's harsh. But if you only have the concrete with no steel inside, it eventually just cracks and collapses under pressure. You need the fusion of both to build a structure that can actually withstand a storm.
Yeah, that is an excellent way to visualize it. And if you think about the profound psychological and sociological impact of that structural mindset,
It changes everything.
it does. If you truly view truth and love as mutually dependent, it forces a community to completely reject two major extremes that constantly threaten human organizations.
Which are?
Well, first, you must reject sentimentality without truth. That's the desire to just make everyone feel good, to avoid all conflict, regardless of what is actually real.
Right, the fake nice.
Exactly, fake nice. And second, you must simultaneously reject truth without charity. That's the tendency to bludgeon people with facts, to win arguments while completely destroying the person across the table.
Man, we see a lot of that online today.
We see it everywhere. But for this first-century network, genuine love flows directly from the truth, and the truth is the only safe container for real, enduring love.
It is such a beautifully calibrated ecosystem. But of course, any delicate ecosystem is incredibly vulnerable to invasive species.
Oh, yeah.
So if truth and love are this perfectly balanced environment, what happens when someone weaponizes that exact same environment, the trust, the love, the welcoming nature of the community, to inject a virus into the network?
That is the exact crisis that triggered this letter.
Because the community was facing a severe infiltration, right? By a group the author calls the deceivers.
Yes, the elder abruptly shifts his tone from this warm, pastoral joy to a blazing, red alert warning.
He really turns the dial up.
He states that false teachers have gone out into the world. And the specific doctrinal error they're spreading is fascinating, especially from a historical perspective. It's a concept scholars call Docetism, or at least a proto-Docetic movement.
Docetism. Spell that out for us. What were they actually doing?
Basically, these traveling teachers are actively denying that Jesus Christ came in the flesh.
Okay, so they're denying the physical body.
Right. And to understand why this was happening, we really have to dive into the deep waters of ancient Christology and the philosophical air they were breathing at the time.
Let's do it.
Because to a modern listener, an argument about the precise biological nature of Jesus's physical body might sound like an incredibly obscure, pedantic academic debate.
Right, like who cares about the molecular structure of the incarnation? Does it really matter?
But for the author of this letter and for the entire early church, this was an existential, apocalyptic threat to their very survival.
And the elder definitely treats it like an apocalyptic threat. I mean, he slaps these traveling teachers with the heaviest possible labels.
He does not hold back.
He calls them a deceiver, planos in Greek. And shockingly, he calls them the Antichrist, Antichristos.
We really need to clarify that term, Antichrist, immediately.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because that word carries a lot of baggage today.
It carries massive baggage. Because of centuries of modern pop culture, apocalyptic novels, and, sci-fi movies, when you hear the word Antichrist, you almost certainly picture a futuristic, charismatic, geopolitical villain.
Right, someone orchestrating a global dystopian dictatorship. You picture barcodes on foreheads and lasers.
Exactly, the ultimate cinematic bad guy. But in the context of this specific first-century letter, the term means something very different, and honestly, something much more insidious.
How so?
It refers to a present, active, concrete doctrinal opponent operating right there within their own local social networks.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Someone comes into town, sits down at the dinner table with this local house church, and says, "Hey guys, I have a deeper, more enlightened perspective. I think Jesus was a pure divine spirit. The divine couldn't possibly have a regular sweating, bleeding physical body."
Right, a philosophical discussion over dinner.
And suddenly, the elder points a finger at them and declares, "You are the Antichrist." I mean, how is that not a massive overreaction?
Yeah, it absolutely feels like a massive overreaction until you step into the ancient Greco-Roman mindset and you realize what happens to the entire foundation of the Christian faith if the physical incarnation falls apart.
Okay, so what was that Greco-Roman mindset? Why were these false teachers so eager to get rid of the flesh in the first place?
Well, the prevailing philosophical worldview of the time was heavily influenced by Platonic thought and early dualism, and they drew a razor-sharp line between the spiritual and the physical.
Okay.
In their minds, the spiritual realm, the realm of forms, of intellect, of the divine, was pure, perfect, and eternal. That was the good stuff.
And the physical?
The physical realm, matter, dirt, flesh, blood, disease, was inherently corrupt, temporary, and essentially evil.
Wow.
Yeah, the physical body was basically viewed as a gross, heavy prison for the pure, divine spark.
So, let me get this straight. To an educated Greek thinker in the first century, the idea that the supreme, eternal creator God would willingly wrap himself in sweating, bleeding, digestively functioning human meat, that wasn't just confusing, it was philosophically disgusting.
Yes. It was deeply offensive to their entire worldview.
So these false teachers, these proto-Docetists, they likely believed they were actually doing Christianity a favor, didn't they?
Absolutely. They thought they were upgrading the religion to make it more philosophically respectable to their broader culture.
Like a PR spin.
Kind of, yeah. They were saying Jesus was divine, yes, of course, but he only appeared to be human.
Ah, appeared.
Right. The word Docetism actually comes from the Greek word dokshi, which literally means to seem or to appear. They argued he was like a hologram, a pure spirit walking the earth without leaving real footprints.
Wow. A hologram. But the elder sees right through this upgrade. He doesn't see it as a PR win. He sees it as a total demolition.
He does, because it destroys the entire redemptive historical timeline.
Break that down for us.
Let's look at the timeline. Jesus' life, physical death, and physical resurrection happen roughly between AD 30 and 33.
Okay.
This letter is being written in the AD 90s, so we're 60 years later. The original eyewitnesses, the apostles, are dying out.
They're passing the baton.
Right. They are transitioning to the second generation of believers, and they are fiercely, desperately guarding the original deposit of truth. Why? Because the entire mechanism of salvation depends on the flesh.
How so? Like, why is the flesh the deal breaker?
Think about it. If Jesus did not come in actual human flesh, if he didn't have a real human nervous system, experience real human suffering, and bleed actual human blood, then his sacrifice on the cross is an elaborate illusion.
Oh, wow.
Right. A hologram cannot die for the sins of the world. A phantom can't suffer.
That makes perfect sense.
And if the cross is an illusion, if the resurrection wasn't a physical triumph over physical death, then the entire framework of grace, mercy, and peace that the elder mentions in the opening of the letter, it just completely collapses.
So to abstract Jesus from his true, gritty incarnation is basically to pull the linchpin out of the entire religion.
Exactly. The whole thing falls apart.
It shows that theology isn't just an exercise in thinking deep thoughts in an armchair. It has absolute real-world consequences.
Yes, it does.
To the elder, this isn't an administrative disagreement over how to run the church or, what color the carpet should be. It is an attack on the very fabric of reality and salvation.
Precisely. And because the threat was so unbelievably severe, the author refuses to just issue a gentle mental warning.
He doesn't just say, hey, be careful around these guys.
No, he doesn't say, listen to these guys, but chew the meat and spit out the bones. He demands physical, practical, borderline aggressive action.
And this is the part of the text that clashes most spectacularly with ancient social norms, right? And quite frankly, with our modern sensibilities as well.
Oh, it really does.
This brings us to section 4, the fellowship boundary. The elder gives an incredibly strict, uncompromising command to these house churches. He says if these traveling teachers show up at your door, do not receive them into your house.
Right.
Do not even give them a greeting. He frames their supposed progress beyond Christ's original teaching, the didache, not as intellectual maturity or spiritual evolution, but as outright rebellion.
It's treason, basically.
Yeah. He says the only way to retain fellowship with God is by abiding the Greek word menio, meaning remaining in the original teaching.
And to fully grasp the gravity and the sheer social cost of this command, we have to unpack the socioeconomic reality of the Roman world in the first century.
Let's do that, because travel back then wasn't like hopping on a flight.
Not at all. Travel was an arduous, incredibly expensive, and deeply dangerous endeavor. There were no commercial hotels or safe holiday inns like we have today.
What did they do then?
Well, public inns existed, but they were notoriously dangerous. They often doubled as brothels, hubs for thieves, and places of extreme violence.
So if you were a traveling teacher, you couldn't just book an Airbnb and be safe for the night.
Not at all. The early Christian movement relied entirely on what was essentially a religious gig economy.
A gig economy. That's an interesting way to phrase it.
Yeah, traveling missionaries, teachers, prophets, and letter carriers would move from city to city across the Roman road system, relying completely on the local house churches for their survival.
Oh, okay.
They needed food, a safe place to sleep, and financial support for the next leg of their journey.
It was a translocal network of hospitality keeping the whole movement alive.
Yes, exactly. But this network was governed by strict cultural norms of honor, shame, and patronage. In the ancient Near East and the Greco-Roman world, taking someone into your home was a massive social statement.
It wasn't just offering a buddy a couch to crash on for the weekend.
Far from it. It was an act of formal patronage. By hosting a traveling teacher, you were essentially funding them. You were giving them a captive audience in your dining room.
You're giving them a literal platform.
Yes, you were offering a public, material endorsement of their message. The theological concept here is koingesh, which means participation, sharing, or deep fellowship.
So here's where it gets really interesting to me. The elder, the exact same guy who literally just commanded them to love one another as the ultimate rule of life.
Yeah.
He is now aggressively commanding them to slam the door in the face of these travelers. He says don't even say hello to them. That feels like a massive, glaring contradiction.
It feels very jarring.
How do you reconcile a religion based on boundless love with a command for such harsh exclusion?
This is the crux of the letter's practical theology, and it directly challenges our modern assumptions. For the elder, welcoming a false teacher, someone carrying a theological virus that destroys the incarnation, is not an act of love.
What is it then?
It is an act of complicity.
Complicity. Man, that's a heavy word.
It is heavy. But the logic is clear. If you provide your physical platform, your hard-earned money, and your social credibility to someone who is systematically dismantling the foundational truth of the gospel,
You're helping them do it.
you are participating in their deception. You are actively funding the very weapon that will spiritually destroy your own children, your own community. To be hospitable to the wolf is to be profoundly unloving to the sheep.
Wow. You know, if we draw a line from that ancient house church in Ephesus straight to someone listening today, the parallels are just incredibly striking.
They really are.
We might not be hosting traveling Greco-Roman philosophers in our living rooms,
Yeah.
but we deal with the exact same mechanics of endorsement every single day. I'm thinking about the modern economy of platform sharing.
Yes, the dynamics of koinonia are more relevant now than ever.
Because it's everywhere. Podcasts, live streams, conferences, publishing deals.
Even something as seemingly frictionless as a retweet, a like, or a shared post on social media.
Exactly. When you share someone's content to your audience, or you invite them to speak at your event, or you partner with their organization, you are engaging in modern patronage.
You are.
You are participating in their work. Just like in the first century, Endorsement communicates theology. You are telling your network, this person is safe, this person is worth your time.
That's spot on.
And so the early church had to relentlessly ask, and this survey argues we still must ask today, does this partnership honor the truth? Or am I platforming a virus?
It really forces the community to practice fierce, active discernment. The letter insists that Christian welcome, while generous, is not indiscriminate.
It has limits.
It is covenantal and it is missional. This strict boundary setting wasn't born out of malice, arrogance, or a desire to be an exclusive country club.
Right, they weren't just being mean.
No, it was a literal survival tactic. It was the immune system for a fragile, emerging network. If they hadn't drawn those harsh boundaries, the community would have fractured, assimilated back into paganism, and this tiny letter would have been lost to history as trash.
But the immune system worked. They drew the line, they survived the crisis, and we know this because of the archaeological breadcrumbs they left behind.
We do.
Which leads us perfectly into the final major area of Christopher Velasquez's survey, the medium, the message, and the manuscripts. If the community hadn't protected the truth, the text itself wouldn't exist for us to read today.
That is a brilliant connection, and it is such a fascinating aspect of studying too, John.
Let's get into the manuscripts.
Yeah, because unlike major historical events where we can point to ruined coliseums or massive stone monuments, there are no excavated buildings, no marble inscriptions, no ancient artifacts that we can uniquely tie to this specific letter.
No first church of 2 John carved into a rock.
Exactly. Its archaeological footprint is entirely literary.
So the evidence of their survival rests on these ancient, fragile manuscripts, and the survey specifically points to monumental collections like the 4th century Codex Sinaiticus and the Codex Vaticanus.
And those codices are some of the most important documents in human history.
What makes them so important?
They are massive bound books codices written in Greek uncial script on animal parchment. They prove the early canonical circulation and the ultimate stability of this text.
Oh, I see.
The fact that 2 John, a text of merely 13 sentences, was carefully copied, preserved, and included in these authoritative 4th century collections shows that the early church recognized its outsized importance.
It wasn't just a discarded memo.
No, it was revered as apostolic truth.
And today, this entire Greek manuscript tradition is tracked, digitized, and studied with mind-boggling precision by databases like the INTF.
Right, the Institute for New Testament Textual Research in Münster, Germany.
Yeah, and they catalog every tiny variation across thousands of manuscript fragments. It's just wild to think about.
It is wild.
A letter this short, which, let's be honest, is basically a first-century post-it note about who not to invite to dinner, survived the fall of the Roman Empire, the Dark Ages, centuries of wars and upheaval, to end up meticulously preserved and analyzed in modern databases.
Its survival really speaks to the absolute brilliance of its structure.
Let's talk about that structure. The single-chapter logic.
Yes, the survey highlights what it calls the single-chapter logic of the letter. It is a masterclass in compressed pastoral urgency. Every word pulls its weight.
No filler.
None. It moves flawlessly through its agenda. It begins with the salutation, instantly setting the dual themes of truth and love. It moves to the affirmation, celebrating those who are actively walking in obedience.
Okay, so hello, and good job to those doing well.
Right. Then the warning, identifying the specific Christological threat of the deceivers. Then the exclusion of error, setting that harsh but necessary fellowship boundary we discussed. And finally, it lands on personal closure.
And I want to talk about that closure in verses 12 and 13, because what strikes me is that after all this heavy theological combat, after essentially commanding his network to go to war over the doctrine of the incarnation, he ends the letter by saying he has much more to write, but he doesn't want to use paper and ink. He wants to come visit them face to face so that their joy may be complete.
It's a beautiful shift.
It feels incredibly vulnerable and deeply human.
That phrase, face to face, literally mouth to mouth in the Greek idiom, is deeply revealing.
Mouth to mouth, wow.
First, consider the materials. Papyrus, reed pens, and ink made from soot or oak galls. Writing was laborious.
Right, it wasn't easy to dash off a quick email.
Exactly. But more importantly, it highlights the inherent limitations of written communication. Even an apostolic letter carrying the full authority of the elder is no substitute for physical presence.
There's a ceiling to what a letter can do.
The elder understands that true pastoral care, true community, and the fullness of Christian joy requires being together in the flesh. which beautifully and poetically directly echoes his theological point about Jesus coming in the flesh.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of that parallel. That is such a resonant thought, especially for us living today.
Absolutely.
We live in a profoundly post-digital, remote working, highly mediated world. We communicate endlessly through screens, text messages, Zoom calls, and emails.
It's all virtual.
Yeah. But this ancient letter reminds us that while you can draw a necessary boundary on a piece of papyrus or in an email, true, complete human joy requires physical, face-to-face community.
Yeah.
You just cannot have virtual koinonia.
You really can't. If we step back and synthesize everything we've uncovered from Velazquez's survey, the major takeaways for a modern reader are profound and, frankly, they're challenging.
Let's recap them.
First, we see that truth and love are inseparable. You cannot have genuine biblical love without an unyielding fidelity to the truth.
Right, the steel and the concrete.
Exactly. Second, Christology, the concrete reality of who Jesus is, specifically his physical incarnation, is the ultimate non-negotiable boundary of fellowship.
A linchpin.
And third, genuine active discernment is required in all hospitality and partnership. You simply cannot endorse, platform, or fund what fundamentally contradicts the core of your faith.
Taking that back to your daily life as you're listening to this, the challenge we all face isn't just knowing the truth. I mean, in the information age, finding facts is the easy part.
Finding facts is easy, yeah.
The real grinding challenge is having the courage to set the necessary boundaries to protect that truth without losing your warmth, your hospitality, and your deep love for people in the process. It's walking that tightrope of grace and truth every single day.
It requires a profound wisdom, a wisdom that, as the elder insists, only comes from continually abiding in the original teaching.
Sticking to the roots.
Right. It is not about constantly seeking the newest, most novel idea, but about anchoring yourself deeply in what has been true from the beginning.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into one of history's shortest but heaviest texts, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We've talked about the microchip, the Greco-Roman duelists, the ancient hospitality networks, and the modern dynamics of platforming.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. But think about the practical application for tomorrow morning. We live in a cultural moment that elevates total, unconditional inclusivity above almost every other virtue.
It's the ultimate modern virtue.
It is. But if total, uncritical inclusivity actually funds platforms and nurtures the very deception that will eventually destroy a community from the inside out, is it possible that sometimes the most profoundly loving thing you can do is close the door?